One of the things I've been thinking about lately is how do you mix, how do you make sense of all the different directions, all the different paths that promise, if you just eat this diet, if you just take this drug, if you just do this exercise, just do this meditation, that basically, your world is set, right? It's the be all and end all, right? And I think it's easy as a practitioner, as a designer, to get lost in the moment, in the detail, right? Because when a practice of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, when a practice is yielding good results, we don't want to focus on other things, right? We want to focus on what's yielding the good results. And so there's a tendency for myopic vision and also grandiose enthusiasm, right? Everyone should try this. Everyone should do this. And as a recipient of all of these voices, be here now, think about the future, set goals, be spontaneous, right? Just do what you feel, be a stoicist. And as a recipient, right, of all of these voices, the question is, how do we build a good life? How do we make a great soup with those ingredients? And it all starts with the one, the circle, the uninterrupted whole, the undifferentiated ecology, the sphere, right? It all starts there, right? It's the most graceful shape, and it's also simultaneously the most simple and complex shape, right? If you generate a sphere in a computer, it consumes the most number of planes and dots because it's just so complex. Because one way you can create a sphere in a computer is you create a whole bunch of lines. If you look at the carving of crystal spheres in Brazil, right? They don't have round blades, and crystals don't grow round and spherical. They have structures, and so what they'll begin doing is cutting and cutting and cutting, right? Until something like a sphere starts to emerge, and then they cut off the excess bits, and then they start polishing, right? So you generate a circle with a very large number of planes or lines or dots, and yet it is also one. And so it is the ultimate symbol for the masculine-feminine synergy. You create it with an infinite number of dots, with an infinite number of lines, and yet it is one at the same time, right? It's also the most elegant shape for transportation, for transformation, right? Every cycle of birth and death, is within the sphere. Everything that we move, whether it's propellers, whether it's trains, whether it's cars, everything we move, we put the weight on the circle, on the sphere. Because it is the most elegant shape, it consumes the least amount of energy to move whatever is being transported from one place to another. It's an elegant shape. Trees grow, when possible, in a spherical shape, right? Because when a tree grows all their branches on one side, they're more vulnerable to collapse. The roots, similarly, soil allowing, light allowing, will grow in a spherical shape. Because there might be a wind from this side that threatens to topple the tree, there might be a wind from that side. And a spherical shape, right, is the most robust shape, is the most intelligent shape for a long and healthy life as a tree. And we stand, when possible, we stand in the center. The least amount of muscle is consumed. The least amount of energy is consumed, not when we're leaning like this. This is already putting strains on several muscles in my sides and back. But if I'll just move to the center, all of that strain goes away and it feels almost effortless to sit here for a long time. And so this principle of finding the center is a principle of energy conservation, is a principle of grace. Now there's also in this same vein, the understanding of the center, of the sweet spot, right? The point where it works. And as we move into the extremes, away from the center, we move into toxicity, right? We move into greater strain and greater dis-ease. You can pick anything. Heat, right? It's an endless continuum. Too hot and you die. Too cold and you die, right? Salt. Too little salt and you die. Too much salt and you die. Now, there are some things that don't go well with our system. We're talking about things like food. Too much and you die. Too little and you die. Space, like, if you can't move an inch off of the planet, gravitation is too strong, you die. If you float off into space, you die, right? Too much oxygen, you die. Too little oxygen, you die. So there's a sweet spot. Now there's some things, there might be a suitable level at which to put arsenic in the body, right? But there's some things that it seems like any amount of it is not ideal for our pattern of energy. But whatever it is that's good, right? Too much kindness leads to disease. Too much cruelty leads to disease, right? It's too little kindness, too much kindness, right? Because truly so, if you endlessly pamper a baby and protect it from all shock and trauma and don't force it to do anything and give it everything that it possibly needs, you end up with boredom, you end up with dependency, you end up with a tremendous amount of laziness and stuff. It's not, you need a certain amount of challenge, right? If we just sit and do absolutely nothing, we die faster than if we get a little bit of exercise. And so what I'm establishing is a template for balance and the shape of a sphere, right? That what we want to look for with all of these different modalities, all these different disciplines and practices, is something that takes us towards the center, right? And that in the center lies sustainable well-being, in our grace, right? The point of grace, of balance, that's where sustainable well-being lies. And consciousness, right? In extreme pain and in extreme ecstasy, consciousness spikes, right? So if the goal is consciousness, then you want to move back and forth between pain and joy, right? Because both of those spike consciousness. If you want maximal consciousness, you move more into the extremes. But as soon as the consciousness becomes overwhelmed, overstimulated, and begins to disintegrate the structure that is holding the consciousness, right? You could drink gallons of salt and feel excruciating pain, increased consciousness, and then the vehicle, the body that is facilitating the awareness of consciousness disintegrates, and then there's no consciousness. So there's kind of a balance there, right? We need to spend some time recuperating, some time resting, rejuvenating the system that facilitates consciousness. And then you can go on an extreme mountain bike ride or a jet ski or a skydive, right? Or an extreme orgasm or whatever it is that moves out. As we move out of center, we facilitate and stimulate consciousness. As we move into center, we create sustainability, we create grace. And so even those two, the pendulum swing between stasis, normalcy, rejuvenation, and trying something new, right? There's a place for both, right? And that's really the theme behind the recipe, right? That, first of all, right, if we're looking at the center as the point of grace, the most toxic positions are out at the extremities, right? Having absolutely nothing or too much, right? Those are the extremities, right? So as we look at one of the things that I've noticed in exploring growth is that as I go from nothing, no therapy, for example, to some therapy, there's a much higher return on well-being than going from some therapy to a lot of therapy. If I go from no yoga to some yoga, there's a higher return than if I do yoga all day long, right? So those are the two extremes, nothing and everything. So that's a map, that's a mental map that correlates with my experience in these different areas. And so I want to suggest a recipe for 10x well-being, right? For a rich and meaningful life. And we can stop or start with any particular thing. So I'm going to start with one of the highest returns on investment, right? The highest return on investment is the most amount of well-being for the least amount of energy, right? Everything consumes energy, a certain amount of time, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of natural resources. Now, we could say that this is free, right? YouTube is free, but it's not really. We're paying electricity. I've paid for all of the film equipment. You're paying electricity. There's an internet connection. So everything takes a certain amount of time, a certain amount of money, and a certain amount of natural resources, right? A lot of the resources that are going into this experience is petroleum, is oil. Or similar, right? Maybe coal plants generating the electricity to power this video, coal plants powering the factories that made the camera, right? So there's a certain amount of natural resources in anything. The uncertainty is the yield, is the product. And the most important product for every human in human history is well-being. That's what we all want. We always have wanted to feel good, to feel better. That's what we all want. We want to feel better than now, better than we did before. We want to feel good. And the best kind of well-being, the best kind of better, is the one that lasts, right? Because there are paths. Cocaine is one of them. There are paths to well-being that make you feel better and then crash, right? There are paths to making money that make you feel better and then they crash, right? We're just dealing with the crypto crash, right? They went up fast and then they went down fast. So cocaine, a boom-bust cycle in investments, they make you feel really good and then they make you feel really bad very fast, right? But as nice as it is to feel good followed by a crash, it's even better to feel good followed by feeling good, followed by feeling good, right? That's called, a more sustainable trend. And it tends to take more skill, more intelligence to maintain that curve, right? It's not that hard to go up and down, feel good, feel miserable, feel good, feel miserable, make money, lose money, that's not that hard. But to steadily increase sustainable well-being, right? Now, there's also simple sustainable well-being. Well, simple sustainable well-being is my life gets better, but everyone around me at the same time, because of what I'm doing, gets worse. That's simple sustainable well-being because we're basically moving the well-being of other people and we're concentrating it in one person. We're not generating more well-being. We're transferring, right? It's like a tax, right? I'm going to take $10 of you, $10 of you, $10 of you, $10 of you. Now I've got $1,000 because I took all of this money from other people. Now I have a lot of money and they don't, right? So that's transferring energy, right? You were all feeling great. I took a little bit of all of you. Now I feel better and you all feel worse. Now this is simple sustainable well-being, even if you can keep it up for a while. Because ultimately, if you're surrounded by miserable people that you have made miserable, you cannot transcend. You cannot keep moving forward. Because that wants to even out, right? And it takes more and more energy to maintain the wall. It's like you can create one billionaire in a city of servants, but you have to create more and more walls every year because all of the people that don't have want what they don't have. And so there has to be more and more energy spent maintaining a wall so that they can't get. Otherwise, it all dissipates, right? It comes back to the mean. Now, the same is true with the ecology. You can become very opulent, like you can clear cut 1,000 acres of rainforest. You can sell the timber, and then you can create a garden oasis, right? Millions of dollars spent on your garden and your palace mansion, right? You can create that little thing. You can have a nice wall around it so you don't have to look at the clear cutting. And you can have a concentrated opulence, theaters, and swimming pools, and all of that. But it doesn't hold up over time, right? Because as this person does that and this person, the air starts getting thicker, right? Meaning the underlying foundation of ecology for the entire species is the forest. And so if you erode the foundation of the planet, your ecology, in order to, concentrate opulence in a microecology, you see, eventually the diseases that tend to spread more, the weather patterns, takes more and more energy to sustain that concentrated opulence at the expense of the environment. So those are simple forms of sustainable well-being. You can probably do them for a certain number of people for 100 years, maybe 150 years. You can do some of that. But eventually the smog from the factories drifts into the palace. Doesn't taste so good, doesn't smell so good. Eventually, the poorer oxygen content from all those trees cut down, there's respiratory problems in the palace. You can spend more and more and more energy, the finest doctors, oxygen tanks, right? But eventually that system collapses because it's not sustainable. So it takes far more skill, far more vision, far more intelligence to create sustainable well-being in such a way that the people around you have more sustainable well-being, and that the planet that supports all energy patterns that we experience has more sustainable well-being, that the air is cleaner every year, that the water is cleaner. Right? That takes more skill. And as Einstein says, the level of intelligence that it takes to cause a problem isn't the level of intelligence it takes to fix the problem. Because if you were that intelligent, you wouldn't have caused the problem in the first place, right? So what we have is, 1% of people currently having enough intelligence to have simple, sustainable well-being, meaning that they and their families will probably have enough money and enough nice things in their little microclimate, while simultaneously participating in the degradation of things around them. Now, sometimes it's degrading the lives of employees and different, in their culture. Sometimes it's treating the employees very well and degrading the ecology, right? So that the planet is in a worse state by the time that whole enterprise completes than when it began. Fewer trees, dirtier water, more chemicals in the soil, etc., right? So it's a simpler form. It's a short-term thinking, right? It requires more intelligence to do something that lasts longer. And in some ways, also, it requires more meaning, more sense of purpose. It's one of the downfalls of the materialist, rationalist, reductionist ethic. Reductionism, if it doesn't go to me, if I give it up, I lose it, right? Deduction, right? There's a limited amount. If I give up anything that I have less, right? That's reductionism, right? And then materialism, just random, there's no point, there's no meaning to anything. So just live life while you can, right? Yes, future people are going to die because of what I've done, but this is all I have, right? I want to make the most of it. Greed is good, selfishness is good, and all I have is this 80 years, so I want to get as much sex and power and hedonic pleasure as I can for me and the few people who serve me over the next 80 years, and then I'm going to die, and I'm just going to lose it all. I need more, I need more. Hedonic adaptation says you need more and more every year, every moment. It's not enough. The first bit of cocaine was Very nice, but now we need more cocaine to get less pleasure, and more, right? We have to pack it in there, right? So the fear of death, losing it all. Who cares about other people? And there's no sense of a cycle of life. There's no sense that in some energy form or other, I, the consciousness that is I, will reintegrate with the ecology, with the energy system, of which I am a part, a very small part. So these are some of the backdrops. And so what we're looking for is sustainable well-being that benefits other people and that benefit the ecology as well. And it's important to be humble, that I, that you, that the cult or culture that we belong to is in a very rudimentary stage. So what we're trying to do is take an incredibly inefficient, incompetent, highly destructive, highly toxic system and make it less toxic, less destructive, less dumb than the system we were given, right? You know, that we're way off base in terms of many of the things that make us feel the happiest upset other people. Many of the things that we pursue and think will bring about well-being are toxic to our ecology. And many of us spend vast amounts of time, money, and natural resources and don't feel that great at the end, right? You can buy a private jet and scoot around there. We just don't feel that great at the end of all those carbon miles, at the end of all of that shopping extravaganza, at the end of all that food. We just don't feel that great. So it's a lot of energy consumed. In fact, for the American cult or culture, we consume more energy, more natural resources per capita than any cult, than any culture in human history. And we are not that happy a lot of the time. And in terms of, there are cults, there are cultures with half our depression level that consumed 1% of our natural resources. Half is depressed. You see, in the United States, 20% of people are depressed. But in a host of cultural models, only 5% were depressed. And in America, where the average American is going to leave 100 tons of stuff in a landfill, the average American throws out 100 tons of stuff over a lifetime, much of which is not biodegradable, is not nourishing, cannot just be thrown in the landfill and magically it will become part of the ecology again. But our Native American ancestors, upon the death of a tribes person, there wasn't even a kilogram of stuff that was not biodegradable, that was not sacred, that did not reintegrate into the soil. So you could say that's a more intelligent design. There's less delusional waste. Because nature, life has no waste. It has a purpose and a use for everything. It's part of an ecology. We have to invent waste by taking energy in nature and transforming it into something that neither we nor nature knows what to do with. In other words, garbage doesn't exist until a human being takes natural resources, transforms them into something, and then says, I don't know what to do with this, so let's dig a big hole in the ground and dump it there. And then it's not part of the ecology, and so nature says, we don't have a use for this plastic either, right? So it just sits there. It doesn't reintegrate, it doesn't serve. And so a culture that produces less waste, less stuff that none of the humans in it know what to do with, is more intelligent, is closer to the ecology. So the first thing I would say is that my dog, going from no dog to having a cute 10-pound Pomeranian, my dog, brings more happiness, more well-being to me and the people around me than probably anything else per unit of energy invested. So my dog in our cult takes dog food, right? So I just ordered $89 of organic dog food that will last, probably 2 months. So that's $40 a month in money. And then there's that bulk of stuff, even though it's organically produced. It's not like ecological hunters went out with a blow dart and, there's a factory producing, the dog food and canning it and bagging it up. So it's not a terribly clean system. But it's certainly a lot cleaner than, having a few spare sports cars, etc., with the goal of being happy, right? It's all about trying to increase well-being. So that's the natural resources consumed by my dog, plus puppy pads, right? Another plastic thing. So that's the cost. The yield is 25% to 30% increase in my own well-being. Then there's my clients. 70% of them love Philip, and so their well-being goes up, right? Maybe Philip brings them more happiness than I do, right? Then there's all the people that run into Philip along the way. Oh, can I touch your dog? Oh, your dog is so cute. Their life is enriched. So I would say that Philip brings more sustainable well-being, meaning at less ecological cost than I or anyone that I know, brings more happiness to me and other people with less, no one's particularly upset with Philip. And Philip is happier than I am, right? He's so excited to wake up in the morning. I've woken up, right? He's excited. Me, I'm like, right? So Philip is intelligent. He's excited to wake up. He's excited to go and see what's going on outside the bedroom. What's going on since he was asleep? He has fresh eyes. He enjoys eating every minute of it. He enjoys barking, right? If someone comes to the door, he rushes over and is very pleased with himself, right? He's thrilled about that. He loves cuddling. And I love being cuddled, right? Usually I wake up, there's a head kind of nuzzling in me. He's rolling around, laying on his back, right? Make sure to get maximum cuddling in. He's smart, right? We should be so intelligent. And he's always delighted to see me, right? It's a sustainable relationship. Can't wait to see me, right? He doesn't hold grudges. You didn't do that yesterday. I'm not talking to you today. No, he's delighted to see me. And so going from no dog to one lovely, cute dog and spending time with that dog, right? I feel more relaxed, helps me ground. He loves to be held in my arms, right? That's his favorite thing, is to leap in my lap as I'm about to get out of bed so that I have to carry him out into the kitchen area where he can look around. He loves chasing things. It's wonderful, right? Going from no dog to a dog, 30% improvement, let's say $40 or $50 a month. That's $600 a year, right? 30% improvement. It's the single best step towards sustainable well-being that I know, right? And he's not going to be filled up with toxic fumes or, incinerated and, exhumed into the atmosphere, right? He's going to get a little hole in the ground, and all of his nutrients will go back and fertilize the plants around him, right? It's a wonderful system, the existence of Philip. So I would highly rank going from no dog to one small dog that you love and learn to care for and attend to, right? It's wonderful. Next, we have goal accomplishments, right? Now, you don't have to take it to this extreme, but I noticed that when I created yearly goals, quarterly goals, monthly goals, weekly goals, and daily goals, and reviewed them daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly, and then created some goals that were just kind of out there, like long-term goals. What I noticed is I had more flow and more focus, which feels better. If you look at Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi and his book Flow, it's a good state to be moving towards something you're interested in, having a goal and just investing all your presence into it, because you're not anxious, you're not worrying, you're not ruminating, you're flowing. And goals are key to creating that state, right? Because a sports person a good sports athlete will experience flow while they are pursuing a goal, right? A sports person doesn't get out on the field and just start thinking, oh, what was the meaning of life? What's the meaning of... No, they get out and their goal is single-minded, to hit the ball into the net, right? To hit the ball out of the field. Whatever it is, they're single-minded in their focus. And you don't get single-minded focus spontaneously except as a crisis response. So admittedly, you can wait around for trucks to start running you over, for people to start shooting at you, for big bullies to say, we're going to get you, and you will get single-minded focus. Let's get away, right? Dodge the bullet, right? And you will be single-minded and you'll have some flow, but you're not going to enjoy it that much. That's called negative flow. It's reactive flow. Single-minded focus to survive. But if you want positive flow, single-mindedness, you've got to choose something to be single-minded about. And that's a goal. That's an ideal. That's something that you choose. That's your goal. And so going from no goals to having a passion, something that is beautiful, that's good, that's true in your world, is the creation of positive flow. It creates the capacity of positive flow. And if you join a team or in a company or whatever, where you work together towards a shared goal, it's a positive sense of flow. Now, well-being can easily go up 40 to 80% by being part of a mission, being part of a goal. And you've got to choose that, or you don't have a mission, you don't have a goal. Now, you can join other people, and they can say, this is our goal, help us. But you've got to decide to make that your goal, or it won't consume your attention. Now, undirected attention diverges towards the negative. Oh, what about that person? Undirected attention goes into the past, ruminates. And all negativity within a survival-oriented brain is amplified 5 to 1 to positivity. So if you've got an undirected brain, it is a negative brain at a 5 to 1 ratio, creating a sense of purpose, a sense of flow, is a way through that. But also know that it is the flow itself, it is the directed attention that does the job of the joy of moving forward, the sense of momentum, the sense of adrenaline, and provides the focus. It is the goal that provides the focus. And it is the focus that provides the immunity, the protection against the tendency to ruminate, to go back to the past. You need a purpose, you need a focus, but it is not the arrival that has the well-being. It is the focus going towards the goal. Because once you've arrived, like, I want to be a millionaire, that's a very crude and unsustainable goal in the sense that many millionaires find they're not particularly happy getting there or afterwards, but I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a millionaire. And then I will be happy, right? So you're actually quite happy to some extent, you know, getting there, I got 100,000, got 200,000, I got this, I got that, because it's providing a focus. And this is one of the reasons why it's so addictive, because money actually doesn't bring about well-being unless you use it in some very specific ways, and it's generally lower level, right? High levels of money does not bring about high levels of well-being, you know. Going from 300,000 to being a millionaire doesn't do that much, right? It may, if it triggers other meanings to you, like now I can do the thing I love to do and retire, etc. But it's that doing the thing you love and retire that does it, right? And so some people just say they won't do that until they have $1 million, and then the million is kind of correlated. But other people just do it, right? And the million would be a diversion from what it is that they're doing that they love, right? So it depends. The point is, you will be moving forward and flow, and then you get the million, and you feel nothing, right? Now you have no purpose because you've already got it. So you ruminate and think, oh, I probably should have been more polite to that person. Yeah, I am a jerk sometimes. Oh, and then there was this time I did this. Oh, and so, now they're trying to get my money, right? And it's just ruminating about things, because the mind is designed to keep us alive by seeing threats, which means analyzing negativity, which is why negativity is perceived by the undirected conscious mind at a 5 to 1 ratio. All you have to do to notice this, by the way, is have 5 people give you a compliment and 1 person give you an insult, and then notice what takes your attention, right? Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all the attention you give to the compliments. But the insult, oh, they're going to pay. Oh, how could they? Oh, my goodness. 3 days later, how could they? In some cases, negativity is blown up 1,000 to 1. 5 people gave you a compliment, 1 insult. A month later, 30% of your whole attention is replaying the insult and then going over all the reasons it's so outrageous. Then all the things you're going to do about it. Meanwhile, other people are, your wife wants to, you're busy amplifying the negative, because that's the job of the reptilian brain, to survive by perceiving threats and responding to them. It's not designed to keep you happy, right? Because if you wanted to be happy, it's perfectly easy, right? You see a snake coming over, oh, snake, liberate me from this body, right? Transcendence, freedom, right? Oh, and another one, just bit me, I'll be dead in a moment. It's great, surrender to what is. Now, the body is dead and the consciousness is liberated, right? And that's happiness, right? So that's how you be happy, but how you survive in a framework in which life seems to transcend or dissolve or make extinct 95% of what once was, right? 95% of all the life forms on human Earth, or on Earth, are now extinct. 95%, if you take the whole history of the Earth. And in another trillion years from now, 95% of what's here today will be unrecognizable or extinct. 95%, right? Because what life does is it creates lots of life patterns, lots of patterns of energy. They all interact. And then some of them come out proving interesting trends, like that's very efficient. That's very intelligent. You're using less energy than that life form, and you're enjoying life more. You're growing more. You're becoming more complex, more interesting. And so life facilitates the transmutation, the transformation of that energy, consuming the energy of the other systems, the other patterns of energy, and growing, right? Well, right now we're in that thing. We're on the ascent as humans to some extent, right? In population and influence. But if we don't evolve, we will be consumed by something more intelligent. And life is a winner either way. Life just stands back and celebrates the winners. The winner is a more intelligent life form that consumes the energy of a less intelligent life form, a less complex life form, in a sustainable way. If it's unsustainable, cancerous, right? You have collapse, right? Cancers are very smart. They have all these wonderful things. They use all the sugars in the body. They replicate like mad. The great party, we're doubling it. In 1 year, we've doubled, right? It's like crypto or hedge funds, we doubled it and then we doubled it again. We doubled it, right? If the hedge funds could just short all the stock market, unlimited, right? And just grow by 50% a year, then all it would take is, 10, 20 years, and the entire global economy would be collapsed. And one hedge fund would have all the money that they couldn't spend because there'd be no economy. They destroyed it, right? And that's the cancer problem, right? When a cancer grows and grows and doubles and doubles and doubles, come on, we're going for a record quarter this year, right? Dun, 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 grow, grow, grow. Let's grow. Well, that works up until the point that the host body of the cancer dies. Like the party's over. We got all this money. We just can't even last another day. We're dead too, right? The cancer dies right after the host it kills dies, right? So it's not a very sustainable pattern, right? So human beings, if we consume our host body and just double in size and double in size, it's going to be great until the Earth's ecology collapses, and then we didn't think about that, did we, right? And then we die too, right? Along with every other organism dependent on the life of the ecology, right? Go back to mushrooms and fungi and stuff like that. And, another 10, 20 billion years, life will be back, right? Life's got time. We don't. Life's got time. As much time as it needs to continually evolve. And so goals provide the focus to diverge us from that negativity. I have a purpose, I have a goal, I have a purpose, I have a goal, I have a purpose. It's that feeling that provides the well-being. The arrival, What's the next goal? That's the thing, to always have new goals. People die after retirement because their goal was to retire, sit around and do nothing. Now they have no focus. They have massive amounts of rumination. It's not very interesting, and they die. So no goals to having goals, but not obsessing about the goals, rather finding what you want to do is find a tension, a level of tension that draws you forward, like I need to learn more, I need to study more, right? So one of my goals is to put all these thoughts in a way that I can understand down on video. It's one of my goals, right? And so I had an idea this morning that provides focus. So I'm more animated making this video than I would be sitting on the couch watching YouTube, right? So more energy is flowing, right? And that flow provides well-being, right? And you will be more animated if you're creating, if you're producing, if you're developing something, if you're giving something, then you will be just receiving this. In other words, one of the things that I sometimes do, and you might want to consider it, is I'll listen to my role models. I'll watch people who know a lot more than I do in some area. And then I'll make a response, right? I don't just want to listen to what they're having to say. I want to critique it. I want to amplify it. I want to adjust it. In other words, have a somewhat virtual interaction, that I'm not just being fed, that I'm also putting it back. And that's really what this video is, right? Having read 500 books, touching on many of these types of things, this is not just passively, oh, that was an interesting book. That was an interesting book. This is how do you put it together in a new way that you've never seen before that could be useful to you and other people. Useful, becoming useful, right? That's a good purpose. Becoming valuable. Well, what's value? Well, every human being in the history of humanity has desired to feel sustainably better, to understand how to do that, to do it with excellence, to do it with mastery, to have more freedom, to have more independence. So if you can facilitate that with yourself or other people, you are useful to the primary goal of every human being in history, to feel sustainably better with mastery. That's part of, by the way, sustainability. We'll add that line in. With mastery. Mom, can you buy that for me, please? Buy that for me. Please, Mom. Just one more teddy bear. One more. And then I'll never ask for another thing again. I'll never ask. Okay, you get the teddy bear. It obviously doesn't make you feel good, though, so you have to whine and do that. It's not excellent, right? It's not independence. I mean, you've got the whine down. Okay, you can have the teddy bear. So you've figured out the vibration of how to create the absolute most enraging annoyance, for someone who has power, so that they'll give you what you want. So bravo, as a 5-year-old. But, as a 30-year-old, is that really, please, if only you'll give me the promotion, just invest in my fund and do this. Well, it's not as sustainable, right, as having the skill, the competence to find what we want in our own, in our various ways, whenever we want to, right? That's a form of sustainability. I'm not, Dad's run out of money. I always run back to Dad when I need money, and I didn't realize he would run out, right? Well, we drained him, right? 5 kids, there's only so many times you can dip into that in retirement and you run out, right? So part of sustainability is to generate, what it is that we want. So no goals to some goals, reaching a state of flow where that's the goal is the flow. You get the flow by having a goal, but the goal is the flow. Because as most people like I've achieved literally thousands upon thousands of goals. And the good thing about goals is they facilitate 400% more accomplishment. Like, this is my analysis of the times when I have goals and the times that I don't or didn't have them. When I have goals that are clearly written down and referenced, and I'm responding in attention, like I want this, I'm here, so I take another step and another step, I achieve 400% more of whatever I think is important because I have the clearly written goal and review them. So that's another way to say that my flow increases by 400%. So clearly written goals. Now, the next thing is if you will pursue, first of all, survival, like if you will put in place the food, the warmth, the weather protection, the health access, whatever it is that you need to survive, if you will put that in place in a clear framework that says, I have a plan, right? Because remember, the mind is wanting to amplify negativity in the future, possible threats, at 5 to 1. So you need an answer to the mind that's trying to keep you alive, but is now ruining your happiness, right? You are alive and it's ruining your happiness. You've got to have some answers. What if I'm on the street? What if I can't survive, right? What if I can't do this? You have to have an answer for that. And if you don't, if your mind says, you're going to die here, and you say, maybe I'm going to die. You're right. I have no idea how to respond to that. Let's just see if we die. Then that's going to amp the anxiety up. What do you mean? What do you mean? You don't have a plan? No plan. We probably will die because you don't have a plan. I don't have a plan. Oh my goodness, right? So there's all that anxiety and frenetic energy. So if you create a plan that keeps you alive, I will do this, I will do that, I'll go and sleep in somebody's couch here, right? Can I sleep on your couch if it comes to it? For a month, okay. Okay, can I sleep? Okay, I've got a plan, right? For the next year, I'm one way or another, on one couch or something, I'm going to survive, right? So getting our needs met is a form of well-being. So we need to survive. Security of survival, meeting our need for security of survival, right? I've got a savings fund here. I've got a credit card here. I'm going to build my skills, right? In a capitalist cult, there's a very big trend in happiness and being able to meet one's needs, going from 0 to around $70K. It can be $30K or whatever, $30,000 in other cultures, or if you're in a different place, but in the US, if you live in the US, going from zero amount of money to about $70,000 as a stable source of income, your happiness will go up enormously because it's going to give you security and independence in your survival. And so it's a good thing to do, right? Get to the point where you can reach $70,000 a year if you want it. Now, it can be a disability check, not as satisfying as, figuring out how to do that, partly because of cultural overlay, but some cobbled, I've got Social Security this, I do this, and in a pinch I can do this work and I can sell it online or whatever it is. But get to that point where you can have $70,000 or more. Now that's your sweet point, right? So that's kind of part of meeting your needs, but that's your sweet point. What I mean by that is, as you go from 70,000 to 140,000, let's say your happiness went up 300% because you now feel independent and you can pay your bills. You know how to do that, right? If you go from 70,000 to 140,000, double, your happiness does not triple 3 times. Maybe it goes up 30% going to there, because now you've got real security and you can start saving and doing a 401k and that kind of thing. Well, then if your you go from $140,000 to $1 million a year, your happiness may not go up at all. It may go up 10%, right? Or maybe you start doing different things and then your joy and pleasure and stuff go up with that money. But just, it doesn't go up proportionally. As you go from 1 million to 1 billion, you may get stressed. What do I do? Am I a bad person? I'm not helping the poor. Now you have all the time in the world to ruminate. You've got no goal. You can't say, I'm a billionaire, I want to have 5 billion. Why? You can't even figure out what to do with the billion, right? It's meaningless, right? So it creates a crisis. In other words, having too much of anything creates its own crisis. What do I do with this? Why? What does it mean? You've got all your negative mind to ruminate on that with no distractions, right? So you can actually plummet in well-being as you get high in a certain amount. So, but going to 70, 0 to 70,000, huge response and happiness. But trading a job that you like, let's say you can get a job that you like for $70,000 and you're with people you like. Trading that for $1 million with people you hate, working long hours and stuff. And also going from 0 hours to like 20 hours a week of focused work, it generally provides more flow, and the flow itself creates more sense of positive energy. If you're sitting around with no structures, no appointments, no commitments, and you go to working 20 or 30 hours a week, the structure itself that will provide a sense of flow, if you like, the activity, that will bring about more happiness than having nothing to do. I just wake up and try and figure out when do I want to get out of bed? I don't know. I'll just lay here. Today wasn't, I didn't really feel anything, right? It was just, I got out of bed around 11, I ate some things, I watched some TV, and it seemed like the day is just gone, right? And I don't know, it was just a good day, but I wasn't really here, right? So having some structure to do something, at least 20 hours a week is my experience. Because I own my company and I can sit on a beach for 3 months doing absolutely nothing. My happiness goes down. It doesn't go up. It goes up when I'm creating something. And so I need to create something that I find beautiful and meaningful at least 20 hours a week. So hit the 70,000 point, however that's done, and then independent of that, even if you're retired and got 70,000 plus a year, hit 20 hours a week of creating, partnering, doing something that makes the world more beautiful, more good, more true, closer to your ideal that matters, that gives well-being to you and to other people. So we've got 20 hours, we've got 70K, we've got goals, and we got a dog. Now, what I also, we're looking at the minimum amount of these things to create substantially higher levels of well-being, right? Because if you start working 100-hour weeks in your job, now it's most likely toxic, right? If you're addicted to money and trying to I want to get higher than I was before, just because, you're probably going to feel worse than if you just were, I reached my 70,000, now I'm about something important, right? Other than just doing something. Obviously that's for one individual, right? If you're, breadwinner for 5 people, you may need more, right? But it's reaching that point where you can securely provide for the real needs of the people around you. Now, another thing is preferences. Adjusting things step by step. And here again, almost all of these are a process. And what I mean by that is there's no fixed point. It's a puttering, it's an adjustment, right? So adjusting things a little bit more towards preference every week. For me, at the moment, it's 4 fresh bouquets of the most beautiful flowers I can find. So every week or twice a week, I will, depending on how long the flowers last, I will go to the florist and I will pick out at least 3 bouquets of the nicest flowers that I can find. And I'll make my own thing. Oh, I like this tulip with these lilies, right? Oh, they've got this one and this. And I will create a beautiful bouquet. And I'll put one on my wife's, by her bed table. If I get jealous, then I follow that up by putting one on mine. Like sometime, yesterday I put that there, it looked so nice there. It's like, where's my bouquet? Well, I went and got another one and put it on my bed table. And then there's, one in the, kitchen island, another one over here. And every time I look at those, I think, oh, they're so beautiful. And I enjoy watching them open because they change and this and that. And so that's a preference. And that probably improves my well-being by about 10%. I look at that and I feel the world is good, right? Because there's these bouquets here. Another thing that I think is good is to digest new media in a way that brings insight, joy, beauty, truth, goodness, understanding, meaning, etc. To digest new media. In maybe an hour, 20 minutes to maybe 2 hours a day, somewhere in that range. It partly depends on what the alternatives are, because there are generally not in our cult very often, but if there's a live talk, a live band, an conversation you can have with a real human being about something interesting, that's probably more enriching and going to stimulate you more. But rather than do nothing, just sit in the house, etc., I would say that having some media is useful. So Audible is great when going for a walk. Like I'm listening to Thich Nhat Hanh at the moment, and I just like his presence. I disagree with some of the things that he says, but I really enjoy him reading the book because he's a master at being in the moment with a joyful presence. And so I don't know anyone better at that than Thich Nhat Hanh. And so it's kind of, I enjoy. It's like, wow, he's really, really doing that well, and his audience are really, really enjoying this. And I love that, right? Because I can learn more from that. These videos would be better videos if I brought more of Thich Nhat Hanh into them. So it's an aspiration, it's something I can admire, it's something I can enjoy. So I'm going on my walks, and I often listen to Thich Nhat Hanh, at the moment. And if I'm in the car driving, I would rather listen to Thich Nhat Hanh than I would just ruminate. So I do, right? So I have Audible on my phone and, just play that in the car. YouTube has a whole bunch of waterfall channels and nature channels where they're like 10 hours long of a beautiful thing in nature. So another thing that I'll do to bring life and ambiance into a house, like if it's just baking hot outside or very cold or something, rather than just looking at the house, I enjoy on the biggest TV in the house having a waterfall going for 10 hours. And I was like, oh, I love that waterfall. And I like picking them. It's like that's a nice waterfall there. Great. I love it, right? And I'll sit and watch the waterfall and I feel like this is great. Like I don't want to get in a plane and fly to Mozambique and hike up a trail and then eat my croissant, in front of that waterfall. It would be great. Just my life would fall apart, right? Because after the 30-hour flight and all that, then it is all the way back and so jet lag and all the carbon. But, just a few pennies and the most beautiful scenes in nature. There they are, right? So I like that. And then I also like thought stimulation. Hoffman and Ferriss were a recent interview. Tim Ferriss and is it David Hoffman? Anyway, really enjoyed watching these talking about consciousness and reality and physics, right? So if I want something to think about, and this is in part creating flow in thought again, because the default mode of the traumatized brain is to ruminate about what could go wrong or what did go wrong and how it could go wrong again, right? And so a certain amount of stimuli is useful. So media. The same is true with exercise. Going from no exercise, I have lived times with zero exercise, or I lay in bed and just notice what I want to do and maybe get up and stay in my pajamas all day and just don't exercise at all for weeks, right? If I will go to, let's say, 10 minutes of walking in nature, that is enough to bring, meaning it's a very high yield. Like I could go on 3-hour hikes every day. I could go jogging for a day, whatever. I could do a marathon, right? And at some point, my well-being would start to go down. Knee problems, time off work, exhaustion, all this other stuff. I don't want to meditate. I've been exhausted from jogging, all this stuff. But going from zero exercise to 10 minutes of exercise a day, walking, skipping, running, whatever I feel like doing, around I have some nice trails near my house. And so that is, I would say, about a 7% increase in well-being for 10 minutes. And that's what we're looking at, minimal thresholds to have a noticeable result, basically. And what we're trying to avoid is extremism, right? I want to do a marathon for a goal, for flow, I want to do a marathon in every state of the U.S. as a goal. And you've got flow there, you've got purpose, right? And you've got energy. And so you can, but it's not the marathon that's giving you the well-being. You may have joint problems and financial problems, flying to every state, and spousal problems. What are you doing? Why can't we get the fridge working? You have to run off to a marathon, and it depends on the situation. But the flow itself, a complete, that will create well-being. But in actual physical reality, a 10-minute walk can be 2 in the morning. It's a very interesting energy, out at night often. But that will do a lot. And another thing is meditation, and I'm going to separate these. So this one is the channel Lazarus has created a morning and evening meditation media product where there's 7 days of different meditations and things like that. And it's a guided meditation. So each one, there's some nice music. It's about 15 minutes long. And I love waking up to these. There's nothing that I've found that I enjoy waking up to more is than to, a guided meditation with a visualization. And it doesn't take much energy because it's guided, which is nice in the morning. And so I'll do that. And that's 15 minutes. That's kind of when I'm awake enough. I don't use an alarm most of the time. I just wake up when I feel like it. And when I'm awake enough, I'll press play and that'll start and go through that. And I see about a 10, sometimes 15% improvement in the day from that habit of a guided meditation. Now, this is also, I think, a good chance to mention, the problem with toxicity and extremism, because in my adolescence, I spent pretty much all of my pocket money, and babysitting money and lawn mowing money and all that, buying Lazarus tapes and listening to as much as I possibly could. And there is definitely a toxicity point in terms of too many things to think about, too many techniques to do, too many meditations to do, and all these different things kind of related with, I think, any field, right? You can buzz out on Eckhart Tolle, right? I have to be in presence. Okay, he said this. Now this. What did he say about that, right? And now he said this. Oh my goodness! And there's 100 more videos. Oh my goodness! I've got to watch these, right? So there's definitely a point of diminishing returns with many of these paths, sitting, meditation, etc., being one of them. You can literally eclipse your entire life just to get to the bottom of one thing, the perfect diet, the perfect physique, right? I'm weightlifting, right? And oh, my pecs aren't quite as the right size. Oh, I gotta do 20 more reps of this. I don't have time to work or talk to my partner. I'm doing, I'm creating the perfect body, right? And so all of these things, I would say generally you're missing something if it's at zero, and it's toxic if it's becoming, I've got to do it or I'm not good enough kind of energy. If it becomes compulsive and kind of frenetic, I've got to find the water of life, the perfect path, right? I've got to find the meaning. I've got to find who I am, right? Is that who I am? Is that who? Oh, right. Quick, hurry up. I have to find it by 6 p.m. I've got to, So that kind of energy is always distressing, exhausting, et cetera, et cetera. But but a little dose, right? A little dose, the minimal effective dose, I guess, would be a way to say that. So that meditation is the best dose of Lazarus that I know, right? So there are other doses, and from time to time I'll do another meditation, et cetera. But after 1,000 hours of listening to all these different things Lazarus said, and some of them are still quite relevant or useful in some form every now and again. That's the dose. That's the thing that there's the joy, the music is beautiful, the vibration is beautiful, it's a wonderful resonance and energy. And I will also let it be imperfect. I would say that's another thing. Like if my thoughts wander in a meditation, I don't say, I say, well, they would have wandered a lot more without the meditation, right? All I have to look at is the meditation a net positive? And sometimes my thoughts wander into great ideas, right? Sometimes I get a video like this during the meditation, and I just say, fine, I've got an idea for a video. I've got a good meditation. I'm winning one way or another, right? I'm either winning in the great meditation and being totally in it, or I'm winning in terms of noticing that I really don't want to enjoy myself today. I wonder what's that about? Because there's a great meditation here, but I'm going to this thing that's not very important, and that thing that isn't important, and that thing that isn't important. Interesting. I guess I don't want to be too happy today, right? Because you can be too happy, too ecstatic, I don't know who I am, right? I'm lost, right? I'm too happy, right? And that's an important thing to understand is the ego doesn't like to lose its pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And joy and ecstasy and bliss is corrosive on an identity. You start changing. And the ego doesn't know where it is, right? And so I let my ego, you need some negativity? Fine. Interrupt the joy a little bit, bring it down a little bit to point you're not freaking out. Maybe we'll figure out, why are you so scared, right? Give some love to the ego, right? And so, that whole field is around that 15 minutes of the morning meditation. And, so that's, that's the little piece of that seems to be really medicinal for me. Now, this is also a good point, or a good time to mention something. You can see these lines, they're all kind of symmetrical, but the reality is, we're trying to get here, and many of these things are in tension, right? You can spend all your time in your mind and not feeling anything. You can spend all your time running around doing things, not thinking much and strategizing. You can be lost in your feelings, not doing anything, not thinking anything. Oh, my life is ruined. Oh, I feel so terrible. And you're not actually thinking. You're just rolling around in a feeling. But the reality is, our starting point in life isn't the perfect center, right? And then we have all these things supporting it. The reality is, life throws us a curveball. So we get knocked into our head, maybe way over here, right? And so that's our starting point. And we've got to get to here, right? In order to have the grace, in order to have the sustainable well-being. So we've got to get from here to here. Now, if we were starting off roughly in the center and just maintaining all this, we would do all of these things kind of equally, a minimum dose. But given that some of us are, down here and some of us are up here, we're kind of even out of, we're way out of balance in certain areas. The thing that takes us towards the center is the medicine. And the thing that takes us further out of balance is the toxin. And so the minimal effective dose may not be enough given where you're starting from. Find the ease point, find the point of grace of well-being, right? If you're so in your head and all worked up and not in your body, and a 10-minute walk doesn't do it, then try a 2-hour walk, try a 3-hour walk. Find the medicine that takes you towards the center. And then once you've found the center, that point of grace, that point of greater ease, then don't go past it into fanaticism, right? Because that's how I got into fanaticism with, for example, Lazarus, is I was depressed in my teenage years. I noticed that Lazarus was a comforting presence in my depression. And Lazarus was the only comforting presence in my depression. I looked around, I said, this is remarkable. None of my family, none of these other ideas, none of this is helping with this. But Lazarus is. That's significant. So then I went all in, right? I'm going to listen to everything I can possibly find on Lazarus, except, that's thousands of hours of material. Well, it wasn't helping that much with depression after a certain point, but I was still in the idea, right? I was now serving an idea, and the idea was to do everything possible to understand everything possible about Lazarus, right? That was an idea. So I was no longer serving my well-being, I was serving an idea that I had correlated with my well-being. And that's how fanaticism usually starts, right? We're destitute, we're helpless. Some church gives us a free food and tells us the word of Jesus or Allah or something. Oh, and we haven't felt so good in ages, right? And then, because the soup tastes good, right? And then we decide this is the best thing ever, right? So I'm going to dedicate my life. It's a very simple plan. So it's very popular. If you can't think clearly, simplicity is very comforting. Like, I'm just going to devote myself to Jesus. But, long after you've done this and that and spent 10 years of your life there, you notice you're not feeling as good as you did with that first bowl of soup, right? And so that's when an idea gets conflated with an actual felt experience of well-being, there's a tendency in Western cultures to attach to the idea rather than to stay present to the felt experience. If I stayed present to the felt experience, I would have to notice, like, that's why my dose of Lazarus is 15 minutes of morning meditation. I actually feel good about that. I don't feel good, I've got to do this, and then I've got to do this technique and that technique so that I can do this next technique, so that I can do this other technique, and then I've got to listen to that again. I've got to look then at why are my payoffs for this not working? Oh my goodness. I'm late for this appointment, but I want to finish, I want to show dedication, and that's doesn't feel good, right? But it's where the mind linearly projects. Like if a tablespoon of salt a day is good for my health, maybe 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons, maybe if I just drank salt, that would be it, right? I'd have it figured out. And that's, I think, it's one of the reasons I'm making this video, is I think that our obsession with ideas while dissociating from our felt experience, which begins in childhood, like, I'm going to hit you for your own good, doesn't feel good. But you have the idea that it's good. So which are you going to take? Are you going to say you're abusing me, or are you going to say this is for my own good, right? You have to choose, because there's a divergence from the felt experience and the idea. I'm doing this because I love you, but it hurts. But I love you. But it hurts, right? So the idea is I love you. Those are the words, the felt experience. And so we are a very confused culture, with most of us pursuing ideas that in the framework of the idea would or should bring about happiness, but actually doesn't. And we are often more dogmatic and more loyal to the idea than we are to how it is actually affecting our life, right? This is part of the problem with getting lost in reductionist thinking and lineal thought. All ideas are constructed geometries of energy, right? And so they go around in a circle, but they're not perfect. And they're limiting as well, right? You have to be able to transcend systems and ideas for full freedom without getting lost in chaos and fear of the unknown and reactivity. It's a balance, right? So the other thing that is, I think, really useful is, because Lazarus, for example, does meditations with that are word and thought-based meditations. So they're designed like, visualize this, and today's going to be a great day, and this. So it's all about tuning and focusing the mind in that thing. Now, the next type of meditation is actually providing more medicine for me as a very highly active mental person than it may be for some other people, and than it does for the Lazarus. Meaning, I find this next meditation, which I was inspired by the book, The Presence Process, and I recommend it as a starting point. I was inspired by that book to do 15 minutes of breathing with a mantra every single day, in the morning and in the evening. This transcends thought. This oxygenates the body. It creates a connection with self, which is profound. And it's a very important thing, I think, to understand that the ego is not the self. The self is that which is present for the ego and that witnesses the ego. And many of us, myself included, do not meet ourself until 30, 40, 50 years old, right? We didn't realize there was another part of us that was there. We're lost in the thought structures that the ego identifies with, rather than that which transcends those thought processes. So I think this is the single most significant part of this recipe, right? Because we're all doing various things to facilitate well-being within the egoic paradigm. The pattern of I am this, thought pattern, feeling pattern, word pattern, speaking pattern, action pattern, and being pattern. That's me. I am this. That's my thought. That's my feeling. That's my body. That's my state of being, right? That's my body, right? That's what I said. I said that, right? I'm identifying with it. But that's not the self. That's the ego. That's not the witness. That's the ego that we are capable of witnessing, right? So every thought structure, every identity is imperfect, is flawed, is in a certain amount of pain, is in a certain amount of being lost and confused, etc. There is innate suffering in the egoic identity. If I say I am, whatever I complete the sentence with, there is inefficiency, lack of perfection, lack of it all fitting perfectly and stuff. There's friction in that identity. And that friction is suffering. And that suffering often leads deeper into the identity. I'm going to do it better. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to do this, which then often creates more suffering. Or the other path is transcendence, right? And that's what this is about. That's about connecting with the part of ourself that is presence, that is beyond words, that's beyond language. It's the witness of what we think and what we feel. It's not the judge. That's in language. That's wrong. Those are two words. That's good. Those are two words. The presence transcends language. The witness transcends language. The self transcends the ego, meaning it's bigger than. The perfection, the beauty, the truth, the goodness that we seek is in the sphere. It's not in the system we use to symbolize the sphere. It's in the whole. It's in the ecology. It's in the one. That is the death of the ego, because to become one with everything is to lose I, which is to lose my identity, my pattern. This is me and that's not me. This is me and that's not me. That is a war. That is a boundary, right? The harder that boundary is, this is me and that's not me and that's not me. Get away from me, that's not me. Stop influencing me. You're coming in on my boundary. The more energy we spend defending the boundary, the more separate we feel, the more suffering we have, right? And the self, the ego is not, the self, the witness is not trying to do that. The self is being present, transcending language. And if we will breathe, if I breathe 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening from the place of the self that transcends words. Now, a mantra is just an attention holder. So the mantra that I use often is like, I, breathe out, am, breathe in, here, breathe out, now. And I let that get those symbols take me beyond the symbols and connect me with a sense of self. The highlight of my day is transcending the ego. And I didn't realize that this was something I was missing. I didn't understand it until the last 5 years. It's stunning, that all that therapy and all this stuff. And, I would open The Power of Now. I remember I opened The Power of Now because Eckhart Tolle touches on this. Byron Katie touches on it a little bit. Definitely Thich Nhat Hanh touches upon it. And I've always enjoyed Thich Nhat Hanh. He's just such a fun presence. I enjoyed him in my teens, and, I'm enjoying coming back to him, at this point. But I didn't realize just how much of my anxiety and panic was because I was stuck within the ego framework that I had recognized was not going to bring about joy. that I could have all the money, all the goals, all the sex, it wasn't the water of life. It wasn't that feeling. That's coming from presence, from the transcendent self. And so the 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, and this is the thing that I resist more than anything else, right? It's the highlight of my day, and it's a big deal for the ego, right? My ego is like, what's going to happen this time, right? Am I going to feel too happy? What about all my complaints? Are they going to just vanish because I'm too grateful, or what? What about I'm cynical about this, right? How can I have that thought? That's me. And it's just dissolving, right? It's just, so I let the ego butt in and, clamp down so that I don't just drift off into bliss completely before the ego has a chance to update, right? To kind of begin things. So there's a conversation there. But so that's the big event and certainly the highlight. And so it's a breathing meditation. The presence process is on Audible. I recommend it as maybe a landing point, as a starting point. But you can also just try breathe 15 minutes. Say a mantra. You can say Om, Om in your mind, because you have to be breathing. But just be totally conscious of the breath in and out until you meet yourself, because they are there. They've been waiting there. They've always been there. Beyond language, because language cuts the self up into pieces that are illusions, that block the self. You have to transcend. You have to move above the self, above language. This is profound. So that I would call that transcendent meditation, breathing. Right now, it's the highest yield on investment, more even than my dog. And the reason is I've never done it before, right? So this is new. I've done lots of visualization, lots of imaginary things, creative stories, lots of writing. I've never done this, right? And that brings me to the second thing, which I think allows me to appreciate it and maybe primes the pump a little bit, which is psychedelics. So here again, you've got toxicity in the extremes. Psychedelics are going to save the world. No, they're not. Psychedelics are bad. No, they're not. Psychedelics are a shortcut. You've got to do the thing. They're unspiritual. No, they're not, right? Psychedelics allow you to explore probability fields within consciousness that you can then get to know. In a psychologically illiterate culture such as our own, you would never know any number of things about yourself that you don't know. You wouldn't know what you didn't know. That's the worst kind of blindness, and we're in it, right? We're deep in sleep and unconscious blindness, where we're so arrogant that we're sure we know, when in fact we don't even know that we don't know, right? So that's 3 levels deep into arrogance. I know that. No, you don't. I don't know that. No, you don't. You don't know that you don't know that, and you've covered it with I know that, right? That's it's hard to find. And that's the job of a cult that is trying to maintain a dysfunctional identity, is to raise people that are good cult members, that copy the form. That's the job of a cult, is to create conformity, to create normalcy. And so how do you maintain such massive amounts of stupidity and blindness? You've got to first not know something, and then you've got to not know that you don't know it, and then you've got to cover it with knowing. Because if you know that you don't know it, you would find it. Say, I don't know this. Oh, let's go find it. But if you think you know, and you're told, this is the way it is, this is the best way, we're number one. If you think you know, you will not go hunting for that which you do not know that you do not know. And that is the tragedy of the Western cult and the Western cults, right? Is this whole hegemony of little channels for awareness that are supposedly superior to all the other cults in human history, when in fact, they're just as statistically flawed as anything else, right? 95% of all the cults in human history are now extinct. Their languages are dead, their belief systems are dead, because they did not facilitate high levels of sustainable well-being for all concerned and the ecology, right? And they could not communicate that to the aggressors. Like, there were elements, right? There's things we can learn from all of our past cults and cultures. But I think the most important thing is to know that there have been 10,000 cults in human history, and 95% of them are now dead. And we would call 95% of them in many ways absurd. But we still think, as every cult member does, that our cult, right, that in the next 10,000 years, that in the next 100 million years, that our cult is the right one. That is so arrogant and uninformed. There is a 95% probability that everything that we think, say, do, feel, and how we are in the world will appear patently insane in the next few thousand years. There's a 95% probability of that. And that doesn't mean we should get rid of it. Cults are generally insane. The thing we can learn from that is if we know that there's a 95% probability that everything we're doing, thinking, feeling is wrong, is imperfect, is absurd, relative to something more intelligent that we don't know yet, we can have a little bit more humility and consider speeding up the process, right? We don't have to necessarily wait 10,000 years. We can just start thinking and questioning, like, is this really the right way to run a cult? Maybe we could try this. Maybe we do this, right? Could at least learn from other cults out there because they're in the same boat. But usually, it's like sushi's really good from here, but not so much the ritual suicide. The land of smiles, such a nice, courteous thing, but not so much sending the brothers to university and sending the girls off to prostitution or whatever, and blaming the child for the parents. Not so much that, and learning how to critically think and have freedom is great in the US. Sitting around watching potato chips, getting fat, watching stimulating, addictive news, not so much, right? Every cult has its gifts and its limitations. So what do we learn? What would we keep of our cult? Our dogmas, our ideas, and what would we let go, right? And so that we can use some of that freedom and independence to question our own cult, including the cult of thinking, right? I'm questioning my cult. Yeah, but are you willing to transcend your own thoughts? Let them go. No, I want to be on a quest. I want to question. I want to think, right? So, so becoming psychologically literate, I think breaking down, going through the antithesis period of adolescence with one's cult and with one's family and identity, to really break down every single thing that is wrong with the cult, with ourselves as members of the cult, with our family, with the workplace, with this. Really understand why, but don't just understand it enough to why it's unfair and what would you do instead? And how would that work? And how could you become that? Can you become that? Can you model what's an intelligent iteration of your cult, of your family, and to what extent? Can you do that, right? I think that's a really great, critical thinking element of well-being. And I think that critical thinking is also good in any system. For example, it was useful for me to get to know people within the Lazarus community enough to understand that their lives weren't working any better than anyone else's, right? And it's, the same is true whether it's Christianity or people that do transcendental meditation or whatever. The fanatics of anything, are often no better off overall than other people, right? And they're certainly not living graceful, peaceful lives. Like if you look at, Esther Hicks, for example, in Law of Attraction. Oh, there's media conflicts, there's fights about this, there's misunderstandings, there's jealousy, there's all that stuff. And to some extent amplified. When you have amplified energy in a dysfunctional identity, the problems are amplified as well as, everything else, right? And so, whether you're president of the United States or president of the Buddhist whatever, or, spend all your time listening to channeled entities or read all the books and go off on your mountaintop or whatever it is, there are imperfections, there are problems, there are things, right? It's not the fantasy of the easy, abundant, where it all magically works out, etc. They might exist. I'm not going to deny that. I just haven't seen it. Every time I look closely at something, it falls apart. And the same is true with psychedelics, right? Oh, I learned all these brilliant insights in 10 years of therapy, so I started taking more psychedelics and more. Are they more patient than average people? Sometimes more irritable, right? Because they have this beautiful vision and then the world doesn't live up to it. And they don't live up to it. So it's irritating. And I would not say that, doing a lot of any of these things brings most people. There's always the exception, because the exception is started off highly imbalanced in one area and then doing a lot of something, a lot of exercise or a lot of, they were all into metaphysics and this, and then they got into business and then they discovered the sanity, right? Because it's a very good, people always pray to their deities. Everything that somebody does is a prayer to their values. Everything that they say, everything they do, everything they spend money on. So if you really want to know what people believe in, watch what they spend money on and do and say. That's what they believe. They read books about things they say they believe, but then they go and do these things and say these. Those are prayers. Money is a prayer. Time is a prayer. Your body is a prayer. If you believe in numbing pain, you'll be at the bar. You'll be high on music, whatever it is. That's what you'll be doing. That's what you'll be saying. That's what you'll be thinking, right? So people are always praying to the deities they believe in. And they're usually spouting the deities they think are the things they should be believing, and then they're doing and saying and thinking the things they actually believe. So critical thinking, I would say, is useful. In partly liberating dogmas and stuff, you'll find that the top people at the Catholic Church are not more spiritual. In many ways, they're more corrupt than the average minister, right? It was the top of the Catholic Church that protected the 5% of Catholic priests that were pedophiles. The top. 95% of the priests would be upset. But the top of the Catholic Church protected and created a whole organization to try and conceal large-scale sexual abuse of children and shaming children, right? Because they decided to focus on boys, right? The pedophiles focused on boys. And so in sermon, they would preach to the boys that they would go to hell and would be hated by God if they were homosexual. And then in the back room, they would turn them into homosexuals by sexually abusing them. You'll go to hell if you suck someone's dick. Here, suck my dick and go to hell. You'll go to hell, suck my dick and go to hell. That's what the top of an organization facilitated, right? We want to hide this, right? So that's another thing you may find, is you visit a healing retreat center and it's very healing. as long as you don't get into the politics of the people trying to be more healing than the other healers at the Healing Retreat Center, right? You go to the Findhorn community and it's wonderfully medicinal and this, and you see that, and as long as you don't get into the politics, right, of this person wanted to be the head of that, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and blah, blah, blah. Usually as you get into the extremes, you find that there's less and less well-being, that the medicine is in the lighter dose of a number of things, and that the toxicity is in the attachment. I was meditating before you did. Why are you doing that? The social media, they seem to like that person. Who cares about social? Are we going to be ridden by social media? So there's endless, people don't lose their egos just because they're spiritual. They just get spiritual egos, where they're just as critical and judgmental from spiritual basis. Like, that was a lie. That's a sinful thing. You're supposed to tell the truth. That's a lie. And they should be punished. Very spiritual, isn't it, right? This is not transcending words and systems. This is just the system of morality and the spiritual thing. They should go to hell. Look at him, right? Unless it's a priest, then they should be shuffled off to another community, right? So there's a tremendous amount of this stuff, and it's important to expect it, because the same egos that have been running your life and your parents' life and your government's life are running those spiritual people's lives. The person that wanted to get away from it all and do a spiritual center, they needed money for the center. They're in the same egoic landscape, the same memes, the same value hierarchy systems, And sometimes there's the dissociation and hypocrisy is much worse in a spiritual place than in a business place. Because if someone wants to make money because they want to feel powerful, for example, because they live in a cult that says that your power and value depends on how much money you have, they just say, tell me what to do to make as much money as possible. And someone says, do this, this, and this, and they do it. There's a lot of integrity there. But if someone wants to feel as powerful as possible, and they judge the capitalist system, so they want to be as powerful as possible and important as possible in a spiritual way, then they're furious that people aren't, giving them the respect that they're giving to the money, right? Because I wanted this. I want people to value me as a spiritual being as much as they value my brother as a billionaire. But they're not. They're all interested. The media all wants him. This, so disgusting. This corrupt culture, unspiritual. Right? I'm spiritual, but they're unspiritual. No, he wanted power and notice and directly went it, but you wanted power and notice, and you didn't want to acknowledge that you wanted power and notice, and now it's infuriating because you can't just say it, and you can't just go and make lots of money because you're judging the people making lots of money. So there's a tremendous amount of pent-up confusion, frustration, loneliness, craziness, insanity, jealousy, hatred in spiritual organizations that are idealistic, meaning they're diverging from what's actually happening. And it's maddening, right? And so, peripherally, it can be, tremendously good, right? I went to a Findhorn workshop at age 13 or so, creating your own reality. No, it was an experience week. That was such a good experience that I then did another workshop, but that workshop wasn't as good. And I left and spent more time at Findhorn. It wasn't even as good as that, right? So there's a lot of things where the minimum dose gives you more. I've often found, therapy can be another good one. I find that the first 3 sessions with a therapist often yield more results than the next 50. So if you try a therapist for 3 sessions and try a therapist for 3 sessions, there may be some medicinal value there that would become toxic if you start instinctively adjusting yourself to the therapist, what they like. Because the more vulnerable you are with the therapist, the more you want them and often need them to like you. Because if you expose the parts of yourself that you do not love and admire and love and care for to someone else, if they also don't like them and judge you as well, you're in a worse state than before you went there. You only improve if they teach you to understand, empathize with, and love the parts of yourself that you don't. That teach you to heal and love those parts. That's the only way you get better. So you need to look good. You need to be loved. You need to be liked by the therapist. But no therapist loves themselves fully and completely. And so you have to start entering into the insanity of the therapist in order to get the succor, the love that you need. You can see that, right? And so you start not talking about certain things, not mentioning certain things to protect the areas for the therapist that they don't love about themselves, or don't, and then, and that is also to take on their disease, their sickness. And so, too much therapy can be problematic. Helping other people, being of service, particularly once you're over the age of 30, I would say, and have accomplished a certain amount, you survive, you're secure in your survival, you have some sense of love and belonging. Being of service, being a part of something bigger than yourself can be more satisfying. It's a thing that can also give money meaning, right? The biggest, most exciting thing for me right now is to save up money, donate it to my nonprofit, and then imagine how to create the most amount of well-being for the most number of people with the least amount of money. And it's a riddle, right? And it's and so fiddling with that, and that's a very exciting, liberating thing, right, to do. So being of service to something we believe in and are, and care about, I think is important and can bring about well-being, not as a substitute. I think it's important to meet our own needs for survival and security and survival and love and belonging and self-esteem. The last of our human needs is to transcend, to be part of something bigger than ourselves, our ecology, right? And I planted 1,000 trees, having worked out that 1,000 trees would provide enough carbon to offset my carbon footprint. So that makes my explorations more sustainable from a carbon level. So, if you have 5 people in your family and you spend $5,000 to plant 5,000 trees at the Arbor Foundation or something like that, then those 5,000 trees, which will be around for about 100 years, your lifetime, will produce more carbon or more oxygen and take out more carbon than you produced with your car and your electric drill and your TV and all that. So that's a kind of a minimal dose. Like 1,000 trees, $1,000 is not a lot. You don't necessarily have to dedicate your whole life to saving the planet, whatever. If 1 billion people would each plant 1,000 trees, that's a huge impact, right? Go ahead, do it, right? Become carbon neutral. Plant 2,000 trees per person, become carbon negative. Now that's a good, sustainable template. I think I've planted 1,500 trees at the moment, so I'm carbon negative. It's just one thing less for the ego to beat you up about is another way to look at it, right? Well, have you planted 1,500 trees? No? Well, then shut up about it, right? Don't just pollute the whole conversation with all your stuff. Plant 1,500 trees and be a net positive, or shut up about it, and let's all do the same, right? And then let's focus on, enjoying a rich life.